Good morning and welcome back to Trans India. Real people, real emotions. We will be continuing our interaction with industry veteran Mr. Shyam Maller, who shares his extensive 3-decade-long journey in the commercial vehicle segment. But as OEMs, I've seen they've been putting in a lot of effort in making the cabin more comfortable so the driver there's less fatigue. What steps do you think have really gone into this in cabin design maybe?
No, there has been. Of course, I think the mindset of the erstwhile bunch of drivers is that they want to cook their own food and they want to, do it inside the truck cabin and stuff like that. That's something which I don't think modern cabins can or OEMs can ever handle. But that's happening because why does he cook his food himself? Is because first, the roadside eateries are not good. Second is he's not paid enough that he can eat in whatever eateries are there on the highways. But I think we are getting there because now I see a fairly large number of petrol or fuel stations which are having nice parking places, washrooms, eateries, rest places. And the general on expressway, you find that there are dining places which even you and I can eat. I would imagine that there are eateries for every segment, including drivers. So the fact is that if you give him a good enough, what shall I say, butter or whatever you want to call it, he will eat there. Why should he cook, right? So that's at the end of the day, it's about how well you are paying, you are taking care of your driver.
I mean, the profession on the whole has to be an attractive one.
Absolutely. And he should not be then, wanting to, cut corners, click fuel and stuff like that. So all that you avoid by telling him that, take care of him. That's it. That's
Simple as that.
Nothing else.
So the next change that we're seeing in automobiles is alternate fuels.
Yeah.
How do you think this is shaping up? I mean, we are seeing a lot of options: hydrogen, then there is LNG, there is CNG, and EVs, of course.
True. I think what started off with, CNG, then LNG. I think LNG has got a little bit lost out because the EVs have suddenly gained prominence. But I think the overpowering reason that this is happening more from a I would say the Paris Climate Agreement that India is signed up to. I think Niti Aayog has also mentioned this. By 2030, they are saying that 100% of the public vehicles are going to be EV, and about 40% of the private vehicles will become EV. Now, questions will be asked: why EV? Why not other fuels? Right? I mean, you can't be depending on just one. And of course, all of us know that lithium reserves are not so very great. And if I were to look at what I have a larger exposure or awareness about what Volvo is doing, they are talking about recycling of batteries, circularity. Now, that's something which is not yet being talked about in India, but I'll come to that later. So why is the government moving away from fossil fuels? One is, of course, the Paris Climate thing. Second is to save valuable forex that is spent on buying crude. So that's the greatest reason why, the twin reason that is happening. So CNG was doing extremely well until the prices went up to host the Ukraine war and all that stuff. But I would imagine that CNG and LNG will have a role to play. And in India, unless you have really ecosystem of electric charging, I'm talking about long distance. Within the city, of course, we already see that the two-wheelers and three-wheelers are doing great. Of course, they also did well because of the fact that there was some subsidy which was given by the states to adopt it. And of course, now we'll have to wait and see how the Tata Ace EV, which is the first of the SCVs to come in, whether at all there is going to be a subsidy or not. But I guess we'll get there sometime. So, but coming back to it, so with all this infrastructure requirements which are required for long distance trucking, so to speak, that's point number one. And second is, of course, one has to do that trade-off between payload versus, because it kind of takes away some payload by virtue of the battery, so to speak. And nowhere else in the world, nowhere in the world, at least to the best of my knowledge, has any battery swapping been done on medium or heavy duty trucks. So it has to be then there for the charging time and all of that stuff, so to speak. So I would imagine that from an India perspective, the right path would be, I think, which is already taken, is CNG. LNG, I think the government is also committed to a fair amount of LNG. So LNG, while it is less green than EV, it is not completely zero emission, so to speak. But I think it is important. It's actually a roadmap towards so-called net zero, if one can call it. So LNG will have its own place in the sun. I think a couple of manufacturers have already started.
Trials are going on.
Yes. Commercial. I think the commercial one started off blue energy.
Blue energy started. Yes. But I think even Volvo is doing a trial.
They are doing the trial. Yes.
Ireland is doing a trial. So trials
Correct.
are on.
Trials are on. But so LNG is going to be definitely a step, and that makes a lot of sense for long distance and heavy duty truck perspective. Long distance buses or heavy duty trucks like tractor trailers. Yes. It is ideal. All you have to do is to put a tank behind the tractor cabin.
Correct.
The tractor head, so to speak. And then you're good to go. You're not really impacting that. But coming back to EV, I think there are some very interesting takes which are happening on the EV. You're talking about heavy duty trucks. I just read about BYD coming in with a 6x4 tipper. So I think Tata Motors showcased one in the Auto Expo. So that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. Of course, I think there are players from literally outside of the industry. Murugappa Group is getting into
so many of them actually.
Amazing. Yeah. So I think the jury is still out as to, because if I were to draw a parallel between, let's say, a two-wheeler and MNHCV. In the case of two-wheelers, the OEMs have been very, shall I say, reticent about plunging into it, and then they allowed a whole lot of startups to come in. But I think in the case of MNHCVs, I would still be amazed to see how quickly these guys will move.
I mean, I don't see too many players coming in there. So because it's a very niche segment at the end of the day.
I don't know. There'll be some segments which probably will look very good. I mean, I can't say that. But honestly, if you were to really ask me, I would imagine hydrogen is probably the better option, given the fact that, of course, if you're able to crack that electrolyzer cost, which means that you produce hydrogen at a low price per kg. And I'm sure you heard of Mr. Mukesh Ambani's target.
Yes, and I think that is going to happen.
Yes, he's talking about
pretty soon.
$1 by 2030, which is about, let's say, even $100. I think it's a great achievement to happen. But then again, there's a little bit of a googling. I think I read about it. There's something called a hydrogen ice, and there's something called a PEM, which is the electrolyzer membrane, proton, whatever it is, PEM. It's a membrane technology. So apparently what shall I say, the purity of hydrogen required in the membrane technology is far higher than what you require for H-ice.
Okay.
So there is a school of thought which says the H-ice would probably be a more cost-effective solution for all that stuff. So I would imagine that hydrogen would probably be a long-term solution if we are able to crack. And I think currently the holy grail, which a lot of companies around the world are working on, is to crack the electrolyzer cost. So if they are able to crack that cost, the cost of hydrogen will come down. Green hydrogen. I'm talking about green hydrogen. Not the grey or whatever. Yeah, that's right.
स्कूल बच्चों का दूसरा घर होता है और इस घर का ख्याल रखना एक प्रिंसिपल के लिए आसान नहीं। पढ़ाई के साथ बच्चों का आराम, उनकी सेफ्टी, छोटी से छोटी चीज़ मेरी प्रायोरिटी है। वैसे ही स्कूल बस चुनना भी एक बहुत बड़ा डिसीजन था। पेरेंट्स का पीस ऑफ माइंड, मैनेजमेंट का भरोसा और बजट साथ लिए चलना पड़ता है। इसीलिए कभी कभी फर्म भी बनना पड़ता है। आखिर कोई अपने बच्चों की जिम्मेदारी मुझे दे रहा है तो कोई बजट की। लेकिन इतने सालों में एक चीज़ समझ आई है, अगर सही डिसीजन लें तो सबसे ज़्यादा प्यार भी प्रिंसिपल को ही मिलता है।
चुनिए महिंद्रा क्रूजियर स्कूल बसेस। यह है मजबूत ट्यूबुलर स्ट्रक्चर, एंटी लॉक ब्रेकिंग, एंटी रोल बार, पैराबोलिक सस्पेंशन, आईमैक्स, वाइडर सीट्स और बेस्ट इन क्लास माइलेज के साथ बच्चों के लिए सेफ और बाकी सब के लिए सबसे स्मार्ट चॉइस, महिंद्रा क्रूजियर स्कूल बस।
So while the automobile industry is really moving forward, by leaps and bounds, new technology, new vehicles, there are still a lot of these older vehicles on the road. although the government has announced a scrapping policy, but that's moving at a very snail's pace.
Absolutely.
How do you see that impacting once it comes into full effect, which would eventually?
Yeah. So actually, Girish, we are living in India and then we have the largest populace of trucks are single vehicle owners. And I remember talking to some of them in your they're so willing, so unwilling to give up their old trucks. That's very sad because what they are not able to understand is that their trucks, if they are 20 years old and more, they will be, leave aside emitting NOx or whatever it is, but they are not going to be efficient. So it makes sense to give it up and then go even for instance, an old 4x2 will probably can easily get replaced by an ICV, which will do the job much better. But anyway, so the retail segment is going to really hesitate to do that change. And second is, given the fact that we are in India, and of course, we have to take a leaf from what happened in the case of FAME and the subsidy and all that stuff. I think there's some subsidy that the government must really come about. They can always say that, the OEMs must give some incentive to buy and stuff like that. But
they've already said that.
As it is, yeah. So as it is that there are so much of discounts going around and all that, so to speak. So I think there has to be a fillip from the government side. And of course, you are absolutely right. It is going very well. And the scrappage center, I think, is just about coming up. So the end of life ELV is what it's called. Policy has to become far more transparent, systematic, because the moment you go to RTOs, and RTOs, is a beehive of corruption, so to speak. So we have to, we mean in the sense, they have to make the registration and the deregistration of vehicles far more transparent. And of course, I think what will make people change is that there has to be something. I think there is no two things about it. Other than what the OEMs are supposed to do. So the government say, okay, this is my share. Please put on the table what you're going to share. I think that's the only, it takes two hands to clap.
If I say talking of discounts, the OEMs have always been in a discount war. And at a recent transporters meeting, very surprisingly, a transporter said that, OEMs should stop these discounts. Though, they are the ones who actually asked for it, but one of them suggested that OEMs should stop the discount, so there's a parity of price.
Right.
So how do you see this discount war actually affecting the industry on the whole?
No, the transporter was pontificating. Don't tell me who doesn't want to have a discount, right? If I want to buy a car, I'll say, how much discount?
Give me a discount.
Yeah. So I think it's part and parcel of the industry. Unfortunately, it's got really terrible.
But it's come down now from what we've seen.
It's come down, but I think it's about the practices that the sales teams have been using. There are some companies which have bought market share by discount. In some, they have not been able to sell the strengths of their product in terms of getting a better realization than what it is. Of course, now the new mantra, it was the mantra in VECV as well, profitable growth, right? Which means that you reduce discounts, increase your prices, so-called transaction price or market operating price. So I think each. Let me give you an example. Again, it's global because Volvo gets compared with Scania, and Scania is also a great truck maker. It's up there. I think Volvo has a higher market share. It is able to get a better price realization, though the technology is more or less the same. So I would imagine that today, if you were to really look at it, Girish, is that with BS6, the technology is more or less the same in amongst all the OEMs. What should be the differentiator? The differentiator is about how well you're able to manage the aftermarket, how well you're able to give them the telematics solutions, and all of that stuff. So it's no longer the fact that my truck will give 1 kmpl more and stuff like that. It is about the total cost of ownership. And believe me, now this is the biggest change which is happening, is that with BS6, and thankfully so, the truckers are no longer having their own workshops. Most of them. Because it's become so complex, they have to go to the dealerships. Of course, the dealers are laughing all the way to the bank. That's a different matter. But
and transporters are not happy about it.
Not happy about it. Yes, yeah. So that's about what it is. But I'm saying that. So that means that they must mind their business, which is trucking, and leave aside the maintenance and operations to the guys who know how to manage it. So I think that's the best way. And what I was trying to say is that the OEMs will have to create that distinction, get a better price realization by offering better TCO to the customer. Now, TCO is one of those up there kind of a thing which not really has been positioned, if I can call it. I mean, I think the moment you get into a discussion, the guy comes to the price. So,
But I think OEMs are going beyond just giving out a truck. So there is a service solution, there's a telematics solution, there's a whole package that comes along.
True.
That's really helpful.
It helps.
For someone who's ready to accept that.
Correct.
Again.
But now most of them are accepting it. But now this is the time when the sales team in those various companies will need to say that, look, this is how my product has got certain strengths. There are some unique features which a brand A will offer with a brand B. So these are what it is. And this is what I'm offering to you as my telematics package. This is what I'm trying to offer you after market. Maybe in VECV we used to talk about uptime.
Yes.
So, and this is a leaf which we picked from Volvo. So therefore, many a time you are able to get a better price by guaranteeing uptime. If I say that the uptime guarantee that I can give to you as a customer is 99.5 or 99.9, and there's a good way of calculating, which is very much doable in the case. That's exactly what Volvo does in the case of the off-highway mining,
right?
Where the trucks run 22 hours a day and all that kind of stuff. So I think it is very much doable that you're able to kind of create a position for yourself and then command the price. And it's a long haul. In India, it's difficult. But I think while the good news is that a lot of the needle is moving towards the medium and large scale 3PL companies, who of course by virtue of their bargaining power will pull you down on price. But then those are the guys who would see value in this. I think it's the two-edged sword that we are in. Yeah.
स्कूल बच्चों का दूसरा घर होता है और इस घर का ख्याल रखना एक प्रिंसिपल के लिए आसान नहीं। पढ़ाई के साथ बच्चों का आराम, उनकी सेफ्टी, छोटी से छोटी चीज़ मेरी प्रायोरिटी है। वैसे ही स्कूल बस चुनना भी एक बहुत बड़ा डिसीजन था। पेरेंट्स का पीस ऑफ माइंड, मैनेजमेंट का भरोसा और बजट साथ लिए चलना पड़ता है। इसीलिए कभी कभी फर्म भी बनना पड़ता है। आखिर कोई अपने बच्चों की जिम्मेदारी मुझे दे रहा है तो कोई बजट की। लेकिन इतने सालों में एक चीज समझ आई है, अगर सही डिसीजन लें तो सबसे ज्यादा प्यार भी प्रिंसिपल को ही मिलता है।
चुनिए महिंद्रा क्रूजियर स्कूल बसेस। यह है मजबूत ट्यूबुलर स्ट्रक्चर, एंटी लॉक ब्रेकिंग, एंटी रोल बार, पैराबोलिक सस्पेंशन, IMAX, वाइडर सीट्स और बेस्ट इन क्लास माइलेज के साथ बच्चों के लिए सेफ और बाकी सब के लिए सबसे स्मार्ट चॉइस, महिंद्रा क्रूजियर स्कूल बस।
But I think you've been talking to a lot of transporters all through your journey. What do you think are the key elements that they should be really taking care of to get their business in a better place?
Well, I think during my time, and of course I was seeing this transition happening, the first generation and second generation were in the process of handing over the business to the next generation, which is what is now currently running the business, so to speak, who could probably be the third or the fourth. Right. There is a breath of fresh air which is happening right now, including the acceptance of cabins, is what you said, is more from the younger generation of the families. I'm talking about the families. I'm not talking about the 3PL companies. So in the erstwhile days, it was more of a brand. This is what my father bought. This is what is being bought in the community and stuff like that. So it was more of that kind of thing. Or I saw these vehicles running in the Middle East. I've driven that truck, so I'll drive it. So there was no other better way of doing it. But then now I think people are the truck owners or the people who manage these family-run companies, I think are getting far more sensible. They are more educated. They are more internet savvy. They know what's there. So they've read about the product. They know the technical features. So I know all of this. Tell me what exactly is the benefit. So to an extent, I think it's a good way that people are trying to head towards the TCO or whatever it is. But I think it's a positive thing. But that means that the sales team of the OEMs have to really get better and know their product and the services.
Right.
It's no longer selling on price, right?
Correct. Sir, one last question. India is moving towards a $5 trillion economy and very likely it's going to get there very soon. What role do you see of the logistics industry as well as the commercial vehicle industry to accelerate this growth?
Absolutely. I think logistics, whether they call it, or transportation is core to any economy's growth. It's the engine of growth of any economy. And for that reason is why Gadkari is putting so much of focus on building up the infrastructure. And we spoke a little while ago that the reduction in logistics cost as a percentage of GDP, which I think they're trying to bring it down to single digit of 9% or thereabouts from the current level of maybe 15%. But I think a lot of steps have been taken around on that path. The GST was one big move. So therefore, the rationalization of warehouses. So it's no longer state-specific warehouses that you need. So there are pretty large warehouses. And we are already into the so-called hub and spoke model.
Yes.
Willy-nilly, it is there, it is happening. And then the next big move is that these large companies or the companies they're getting into, the retail companies, they will realize multi-modal. Maybe they will find that there are some routes which are better done by ship. Some companies, I think somebody recently ordered an aircraft for e-commerce. I think Amazon, yeah.
Yes. India is racing towards a $5 billion economy and we are likely to get there very soon. How important is the role of logistics as well as the commercial vehicle industry in accelerating this growth or supporting this growth?
I think the focus which the government has been putting in on building the infrastructure is amazing. I think we've got to give it to them. I think it's been happening from Vajpayee's time, the full quadrilateral, north-south, east-west corridors and all that. I think now it's a different level, the expressways, the multimodal logistics parks and all of that. And it's not just roads, it's about connecting industrial areas with the industrial hubs with the important highways and stuff like that. So I think we're all geared up to making the logistics cost as a percentage of GDP to the so-called target of maybe 9%, which is what the developed economies are. I think we're getting there. So it is not just about roads, it's about ports, it's about waterways, it's about air. So I think there is a good mix of all of this, which is going to be important. And that's where I think the larger and the more organized 3PL companies will be able to take advantage of this to use it very smartly. And I was just talking about the railways. I think they're getting their act together. I mean, for years together, they've been good at moving commodities like coal and iron ore at the cheapest possible cost, which of course, I don't think the road can ever manage that. So I think now they are getting into the freight corridors, which are becoming extremely efficient, so to speak. And of course, the success today which has been touted is the Maruti, which has used them railways to a very large extent to reduce their cost of transportation, so to speak. So I would imagine that this is going to be here to stay. But coming back to the question is that yes, the road infrastructure is going to be still, I think, at this point in time, if I recall right, the road to rail would be almost 70 to, or maybe more 75, 25 or
75, 85.
So I would imagine that would be under threat unless these guys get their act together. And of course, it's that, as we now know, that expressways like Delhi, Mumbai is going to be 24 hours. I can imagine that they will give the railways also a run for their money. You never know. So it's a very evolving kind of situation. Of course, the new fuel, as you talked about, that's another ball game by itself. So I think it's unfolding fast.
And the future looks very exciting.
Exciting, daunting, challenging. You never know as to what's going to happen next. Actually, what's going to happen next? Do I put my bets on EV? Do I have to go for LNG? So it's going to be a challenge. I mean, of course, look at OEMs; they'll have a nightmare. Absolutely, in terms of developing some of these products concurrently, and a whole lot of range, a much wider range as well. Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, the other part is on the infrastructure required for. I'm talking about the charging infrastructure or whatever. That's another game, so to speak. But I think great times. We know some big houses are got into the act of new fuels. And of course, there are some OEMs who have a fairly large ecosystem of making batteries. They are into power and all of that stuff. So I think that orchestration of all these forces coming in together will definitely be a cutting edge for some of the OEMs because they can get this act together. So I think exciting times. All right.
Exciting?
Yes. Looking forward to it.
Well, friends, that was our interaction with Mr. Shyam Maller. As we know, the future is very exciting, but as he said, very challenging as well. Not just for the OEMs, but for the transporters. We'll be back again next week with another exciting interview. Until next week, stay safe. Jai Hind.